What's up, everyone? Maximilian here, and welcome back to Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, the Online Warrior Season 2, and we just hit episode 22. So last episode we were talking about losing all hope, and some of the things you need to do to try to, reinvigorate your spirit if you're losing a lot, if you don't know what to do in a fighting game, and if you're completely stuck. It's time to switch things up a bit. In situations where, in situations where you're, having trouble against certain characters, you just can't find a way through, use those characters a little bit and see if you can find the openings and the holes in defense and where their offense is not actually effective, and then use that against your opposition. That actually helps out a lot for me if I start using the character a little bit. And one of them was actually Nova. I get blown up by Nova an awful lot, and I ended up using him, and I like him a lot just because he has some pretty good synergy with the team that I'm currently using right now. And as you're seeing right now, the Nova that's going to be going through this full set of videos that's going on this episode of The Online Warrior is definitely getting a little bit better. I feel like there's some things that I understand a lot more, and for you guys that need to understand things about Nova, one of the things I wasn't taking advantage of is the fact that Nova's standing jab is amazing. It doesn't cover, a huge part of the screen as far as, below the jab. If some characters are crouching, it'll actually whip, but what it does really well is apply pressure and you can rapid fire it into a hit confirm combo. I found this to be extremely effective, and I don't use it very much at the start, but the more I learn about it, the more I end up using it. One thing I have to do is learn how to negate push blocking, and push blocking is one of those things that is so effective in Ultimate Marvel 3 if you time it correctly, and it can be one of the most brutal strategies if you learn how to counter it. Essentially, if you perfectly time a dash after a push block, you can actually negate the push block completely, and it leaves you at a huge disadvantage, meaning you don't want to actually push block all the time. This is something I need to learn a little bit more, especially with my nature of just immediately push blocking everything somebody throws at you. Sometimes it's actually really bad. Sometimes push blocking will put you into a situation you don't want to be in, especially on incoming, and other times you actually will lose opportunities where the opponent might be unsafe. So it's hard to explain what situations these might be, but in the event of something like Virgil doing a down heavy helm breaker in the middle of the air, you always want to push block it because Virgil is always very safe after that. Most of the time, if you try to punish Virgil, he'll just jump up and do another one, and he'll hit you every single time. So that's kind of a good example, and I'm sure there's some others that you guys might be able to figure out too, like the Hulk and stuff like that. Nonetheless, I'm having a lot of fun with Nova. I'm figuring out how to move in some of his push blocking strategies because he has these really good guard cancel setups on incoming characters that if they push block, you get a free throw. And that's really effective. It's really good. So I'm digging Nova right now. But moving into the topic of conversation, I actually went out to you guys, the audience, about a topic of conversation this week because it's been a pretty slow week for the Marvel over this past, and what I wanted to do was to tackle something that has been a concern, and one that I saw quite frequently, over and over and over again, and so this is for you guys, and I thought it might actually make an interesting topic, is the lasting power of fighting games, and the lasting power of a game like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. We've talked about this stuff before, where it's 10 more years and things like that, but that was mostly related to patches and balancing, and the fact that we're going to have to deal with this stuff, and this is somewhat related, although those videos are made almost a year ago now. And the game has changed very much since then. Now we've discovered things like all of these crazy setups that involve infinites, involving TAC infinites. A lot more characters' infinites are getting discovered, as well as just the effective powerfulness, the how effective and powerful something like Keep Away can be in the hands of somebody like Chris G using Moradou. As another question I was getting is, how prevalent do you think that tactic is going to be in the long run of the competitive history of this game? And in my opinion, just to cover this before we get into the main topic, which is the lasting power, I think that strategy is going to be almost impossible to beat. Because it cuts down everything. It cuts down all of the strategies, all of the crazy mix-up. If Morrigan is able to consistently do her game plan and keep all those fireballs on the screen, and if Doom stays alive, it's really good. The best bet you have is to, or the only thing that would stop this is if Morrigan did not have an invincible hyper, and her Shoryuken hyper, where she throws all the blades from the ground, makes her completely invincible. If she didn't have that, it might be a different story, but the fact is, the way the character is right now and the composition of that team, whether it's Morrigan and Doom or whoever else you want to put on there, Virgil's really good too, It's extremely powerful, guys. I don't know if that's going to actually go anywhere very soon, and I would not be surprised if that's what wins EVO this year. There was a couple of crazy fluke factors that happened at EVO last year, which represented, or which came to the fact that Christie did not make it up into the grand finals, and it ended up being in for it. There were some wacky things that happened that should have been done, but in the event of the biggest freaking competition in the world, nerves get extremely racked, and it's easy to understand. So that's to briefly answer that question. When it comes to the competitive play of this, I think the stuff that'll be really good is this keep away with Morrigan and Doom. I don't think keep away in general will be extremely common, but it will be really good, and especially in the online environment, what you guys need to realize is that keep away in an online environment is huge. And I keep seeing a lot of questions from folks asking me about certain tips about composing a team, about blocking things like keep away, about how do I deal with the speed of this game. And I think I'm actually going to bring back the Quick Tips series, or a tips series in general, which is going to actually involve a brief, like probably less than 5-minute video, which will explain go straight to the nitty-gritty and the meat of how you deal with things like keep away. What are the best things that you can do? What are the best things you can do about mobility? And what are the best things you can do about finding a team composition? Maybe I'll do that. I'll actually give that a shot and jump back into Quick Tips. And if you guys want to see like one video a week about like a certain tip or covering something you guys would like to see, that'd be great. Because I'm going to keep the Online Warrior series about a discussion about discussing things in the community, the act of the game, how the game is evolving, and things like that. So now that that's covered, it's been a little while since I talked about it, but the topic at hand is the evolution of this game and its lasting power. So the nice thing is that Ultimate Marvel 3 has been out for over a year now, and the Marvel vs. Capcom game has been out for just about 2 years now, and it's remained to be a really popular title. In comparison to other fighting games, as far as people getting excited for things, you know, this whole When's a Marvel thing that's been developed by a lot of stream monsters, and you see it in like even esports tournaments, people get really excited for this game, and it's fair to say because it has all the inherent things that are just designed for a game to be exciting. Things like X Factor might be the cheapest damn thing in the game, but my god, does it pull in the viewers, you know what I mean? People might get on my case about making X Factor comebacks with Strider, but would you rather it be an X Factor comeback with Virgil or something like that? It's just one of those things that lends excitement to the game, where it's like everything seems down on their luck, they still have X Factor, can they make it back? And that's one of the reasons why it has lasting power, is because it's got the most brutal comeback mechanic of all time. And that's not exactly a bad thing, it's just something that's very different from the fighting games that I grew up with, and it's frustrating! It can be super frustrating, but those things, like those emotions that Marvel brings out, it's the same thing in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. People get really emotional, people get really hyped about this stuff, and that's what brings in the audience the most, is all of this hype and all this emotion that the players get. That's one of the biggest contributing factors to lasting power, is also the fact that this game has a huge roster. It has a huge roster of characters that are somewhat underdeveloped and not seen very often, and that is a big thing. When it comes to a lot of fighting games that are one-on-one, you see these matchups a lot of the time, and you understand, okay, this is clearly in this guy's favor. If this guy can make it, it's a huge comeback for this character, and the other person usually wins, so he's probably going to win. In a game like Ultimate Marvel 3, that's completely gone because there is team synergy and team tier lists that you can really consider. Like, when you come to character versus character, that doesn't matter in this game. It all matters how much that character works with other characters on their team. And that's really exciting too, because every time you jump into a stream, you see somebody using some crazy team, and it gets really fun. I'll never forget the first weeks of this game coming out, and that's one of the biggest reasons there's lasting power for Ultimate Marvel 3. But as far as it lasting very much longer, it's really hard to say. Fighting games in general have this unique perspective to put them in when it comes to a lot of other competitive games. Not a lot of competitive games in general, as far as like things people play over time, unless they're like League of Legends or StarCraft, actually stay in the competitive spotlight for a really long time. Some shooters might, like some in the Quake series and Counter-Strike and stuff like that. But for the most part, games get updated really quickly nowadays, and especially when it comes to the competitive level of gaming and getting excited for these huge events and competitions, fighting games kind of rely on the fact that there's a growing fan base for each one of these titles, and it just happens to be that the fan base, or at least the vocal fan base, for Ultimate Marvel 3 seems to be really big, right next to something like Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition 2012. That game has probably got the biggest legion of players behind it, because Street Fighter 4 was the game that brought everybody to it. But Marvel is new, it's different, it's easier to get into somewhat, but also extremely difficult to get into for a newcomer, because there's so much going on and there's so much action. These are actually the questions I get the most, is just understanding what in the hell is actually going on in Ultimate Marvel 3 besides it looking really cool. That's another big factor why it stayed amongst the community spotlight for the past over a year now, is the fact that it looks good even to people that aren't extremely hardcore with the game. Now, when it comes to guys like myself, I try to do my best to stay close to these games and to try to stay competitive with them, but it's really hard. I feel like I understand fighting games really early, like breaking down a fighting game and getting to what's good, what does damage, what's effective, and what this game is going to be like in the long run is really where I shine when new games come out and discovering and divulging into it. I like that the most too. I find that to be the most exciting, is discovering new things. But as far as keeping up with the competition, it's really about how much time you're willing to dedicate putting into a game and just dedicating however many hours into versing as many people as you can to get accustomed to fighting people, because that is what will make you good. The lasting power of this game also really depends on how much character variety you have and how much time you put into all your other teams and learning this synergy. In comparison to Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Marvel 2 for the first 2 years was pretty damn amazing. There were these new combinations of stuff. You saw Magneto doing all these crazy things, and it was really spectacular, and it was really fun, and it was really cool. But I never really stayed competitive after the first couple of years, especially when it was the Psylocke, Storm, Cable, Captain Commando, Sentinel, and Magneto teams just absolutely everywhere. And it kind of burned me out as well. I don't have anything against it. I don't have any obligation to play these characters as well, because everyone's you gotta play these guys if you want to win. And that's starting to become the way in Ultimate Marvel 3 in competitive play, so it's kind of it's gotten to the point where Marvel 2 is a character game of about 5 to 6 characters out of 55 or however many were in it, 56. In Marvel 3, it's starting to get there, but it's not quite there yet. We're still at this point where these teams that are composed of some low tier and some good assists and other powerful characters can still do really well against almost anybody in the effectiveness of a tournament or something like that. And I think that Marvel 3's probably got another year under its belt until it starts to get pretty old. Because I think after EVO this year, and after a bunch of the tournaments that are going to be going to EVO, like Jabali's tournament in Florida, which is CEO, Keats' tournament, which is UFGT, that's going to be taking place in, I think it's in Chicago, and all these Road to EVO tournaments are kind of going to be the placeholders of what EVO is going to be like, you know what I mean? These character placeholders as far as what characters we're going to be seeing dominant and prevalent on the way to EVO, and after EVO, things are probably going to change quite a bit, because there's a huge lull time, right after EVO. So, I think this game will stay in the community spotlight for quite a bit. I think it's got 2 more EVOs where it will stay, on top, until something else comes out, until another fighting game. At least I hope another fighting game comes out, because I honestly do think we should probably get a fighting game or 2 every year or so, especially a Capcom one, which is ones that people, including myself, get really excited about and everyone goes crazy in the community for. Things like Injustice and things like New Tekkens and updates to Skullgirls are all completely awesome in themselves, but the ones that pull huge tournament attraction tend to be Capcom games, and that's just kind of the nature of the fighting game community. It's rough when you have guys that are really into Tekken and they want people to get into their other games, and they're just so completely different that people are I just like Capcom games. I can't really say much else about myself because I'm kind of guilty of it as well. I just really like Capcom characters, and I can't help it. So I'm hoping that Marvel has a little bit more lasting power. Marvel 2 lasted 10 freaking years. And after the first couple of years, there were people that casually played Marvel 2 every once in a while, and then it was strictly, in competitive play, a lot of just the crazy hardcore guys that used the top tier, and some guys that used crazy bottom tier stuff and were ridiculously good with them. It was really popular in tournaments. It brought a lot of hype to things like EVO during the mid-2000s, which were still really fun to watch. But its lasting power in the general perspective didn't really happen until there was that Yipes video where he had all of his sayings and stuff like that of him in the arcade, and that made front page Kotaku. That kind of made Marvel relevant again, and until something like that happens for Ultimate Marvel 3 to make it completely relevant to the perspective of people at home and not playing fighting games all the time, it's pretty uncommon nowadays, especially with the internet. Unless something crazy like the Third Strike Daigo parry video happens again and the entire audience goes absolutely insane, maybe. It did happen early in the career of Marvel 3 with the Spencer, Combo Fiend Spencer comeback, and I think it was Final Round back in like 2011 or so. It was a huge comeback. It was him versus Marn. The bionic arm thing everybody knows about. Made it onto TV, websites, tons of views everywhere. But not nearly as many as something like the Daigo parry video, which was actually hugely responsible for me wanting to get into competitive Third Strike. It looked that cool and I wanted to play it that much, and it's the same for a lot of people. And Third Strike was huge for a long time, and then it kind of died out and went into a hardcore thing once again. Marvel 3 right now is definitely residing pretty high amongst like the hardcore fan base. People still get crazy for Marvel Finals. People still watch a bunch of Marvel videos, and even on my channel, like, it's the most views of anything, and it's really good for the middle-core audience as well. Like, I think I'm actually a middle-core. I don't consider myself a really hardcore and extremely proficient Marvel vs. Capcom player. In honesty, between most of the games that go up on this channel, I'm probably not as good at Marvel compared to like the original Marvel, Third Strike, Street Fighter Cross Tekken. That's just in my opinion. But it still pulls in a lot of views because people really enjoy watching the crazy, hectic gameplay and things like comebacks and X Factors and all this type of stuff. All this leads up to why a game like Marvel has lasting power. But I do think in about a year or so, in conclusion, in a year or maybe a little bit more than a year, this game will start to trickle off a little bit, and maybe some other fighting game that comes out might actually take the spotlight. So we'll see about that. If you guys want to submit any other questions or concerns for a later episode of The Online Warrior, please let me know in the comments below. But this was a pretty good one, and it gives us a chance to understand what makes a fighting game last, and how much longer do you think it could possibly go. Until then, my name is Maximilian, and I'll see you guys next time.